Welcome back, everybody. We are on episode 3 of The Lion's Share. And last time we left off on the end of intro and how to read this book. Lara's going to have a couple quick things to add to that, and then we're going to go into chapter 1. But before we start, I want to thank Emma and Jam from Treasure Hunt with us for giving us a nice mention in their last live stream. They are working on Beyond the Map's Edge. They're really killing it over there. I'll leave a link in the description for their video to check them out if you haven't already. And thanks again for that. And we will go to Lara with her cleanup in the an aisle intro to how to read this book.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, glad to be back with everyone. I had a couple things that I keep going back to in the how to read this book that I just want to kind of frame up before we dive into chapter 1 that really are guiding how I think about everything that I read. So I'm going to read a couple things that he's said throughout pages 16, I guess, page 16 of the how to read this book. He says, I have subtly placed many clues within the text of this book. They are not always overtly obvious. You may or may not pick up on all of them right away. Then he says, if you find a topic or story captivating or intriguing and your instinct is to go research further, I invite you to do so. It's not outside the realm of possibility. That was my exact intention. Who knows what fun and interesting stuff you may discover. And so we've had some dialogue, over the last many months about everything you need to know being within the book. But when, as he says, inviting you to research further, could you find the boxes without researching further? Possibly. But I feel like there is some merit there to the researching further, to diving in, digging into the people that he's talking about and finding out or even fact checking some of the things that he's included about those characters. So that sets the stage for some of the questions I'm going to ask you about chapter 1. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to revisit that. And then the last thing he says is almost every chapter of the first 23 includes at least some morsel of info helpful for finding the largest box. Don't overlook any part. And so the thing that stood out to me is that he says almost every chapter of the first 23. He doesn't say every chapter of
Yeah.
the first 23.
Yeah, I remember
And
talking about that.
so yeah. I mean, what do you think? Is that just loose language,
Yeah,
or does the almost have something
no,
there?
it's a good point. And first of all, you froze up a little bit. We were having problems with our internet today for some reason, so we had to switch to our backup internet. So in case we freeze up, that's why. But it was only for a little bit. Hopefully, it won't give us any problems. But yeah, this is something I go back and forth with myself, and I hear comments back and forth because I constantly flip flop my views on this. He says all the clues are in the book, and I really had a hard time with that concept. So, moving into the next chapters, I have found myself going and doing a little research to validate things. So, you put me on the spot here on this one. I don't think it's out of the realm to do some background information. Are we going to find the smoking gun outside of the book? I don't know. I think there's some things that'll help us out if we look into different concepts, different ideas. But is it going to be something like, you're doing a research paper and you need to go to the trip to the library and check out a bunch of books and read them. I don't think it's that extreme either. So something in between, maybe. I find myself and I've done it in this chapter looking up Scottite What is that? Was that real? We'll talk
Mhm.
about that later. And found some interesting stuff on it. Is it a coordinates where something could be? I don't know, but yeah, if that's not a clear as mud answer for you, it's something we have to keep
Uh,
in the back of our mind. That being
yeah,
said, I don't think we need to hang our final solve on a majority of information outside of this book, but I think it could guide us to something or reveal something later on. I'm not overlooking it though, and gathering for more information, probably not putting as heavy as weight on it, but
right, right. And I guess not to get tangled all around it, because I do want us to jump into uh, chapter 1 on this episode, but everything we need to know is in the book, but maybe not. uh, So maybe not every detail of the things that we're hearing about is within the book. So, for example, in this chapter 1 that we're getting to, so maybe this is a good segue to it. Um, he talks about Mike Scott, right? And Mike Scott and the map and kind of having a plan and all of that. Well, Mike Scott is in the book and in a fair amount of detail, right? Apple is in the book in a fair amount of detail, but do we need to research Mike Scott and Scotty, like you said, and Apple a little bit further in order to feel solid about the solve?
well, there's a lot to research there. You know, research Apple.
I
How
know.
much more do we need to research? I think it's something,
Right.
without getting wrapped too far around the axle on it. I think it's something that if there's something that jumps out, then we dig a little deeper in it. But as far as researching Apple, the company, I don't. There's so much stuff you can. I mean, you could write your
Right.
master's thesis on that. You know, I don't.
Right.
So yeah, there are things, and I'll make sure, at least the things that I've done, that I've looked outside the book, will bring it up so people sort of see how we're doing it. And yeah, if somebody else has a different idea, I'll drop us a comment or email or something and give us your opinion on that, because you can go from one end of the spectrum to another on it, and the idea
Yeah.
isn't
I would
isn't
love
to
to know
get to.
people's
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to know people's opinions on that topic. So drop it in the comments. We want to know, like, do you feel like it's necessary to research
And how deep a
outside of what's
research,
in the book,
right? Yeah, and how deep a
and
research,
how deep a
because
research? Yeah.
that's important too, right? um
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
but on part one, I would just wanted to start off with, I always put a pretty high value on these comments, or not comments but quotes in on each of the chapter, because there's a reason. Like if I'm writing a book and I'm going to put a comment in, or comment a quote in there, I'm going to think about it, and it's going to really be the, like, underneath the title of it. That's the next thing, right? So there's a lot that went into that. There's two on this one, and there's some chapters that only have one, but we'll get to that later. But the first one's from Eleanor Roosevelt, and I did, when I first started this channel a couple months ago, I went in deep dive on it, so we don't have to get that deep on it, and we won't. But I did find these really interesting. The first one is Eleanor Roosevelt says that it takes as much energy to wish as it does to plan. And then the second one is Mary Oliver. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one and precious life? But the first one, I could swear that teachers told me this countless times. It's sort of like the quote, it takes just as much time to do it right as it does to do it over, or something like that, because you rush through. I remember that sign in principal's office in middle school, but that reminded me of that quote.
Yeah.
So it takes the same energy to wish as it does to plan. So why not just plan? I think you get more out of it.
Not that you spent a bunch of time in the principal's office. I mean,
No,
not
not at
meaning to
all.
infer that at
I
all.
just happened to walk by because my locker was there, maybe. Or, but
Uh-huh.
this
Uh-huh.
this topic, this is really setting the stage for the whole book, I think, and this is what I like about the first
Yeah.
chapter. Is the first chapter. There's a lot in there which really sets the stage for the book, um, more so than what we covered over the intro and how to read this book. So, I have a couple things I flagged
Yeah.
in here, but if you wanted to start off with some of the, the quote, not quote, or some of the information that you wanted to that jumped out at you, you wanted to talk about first.
Right. So the first, obviously the theme of this chapter is having a plan, right? And I think holistically, we see that in both of the quotes that you just talked about that I completely skipped over as I was reviewing my notes. So they weren't even on my mind. But also, that is kind of the whole premise of the story about Apple and Mike Scott as a part of Apple is that he was the one who had the plan. Like that's how John unfolds his story about Apple. It becomes about Mike Scott and the plan, and that Apple had its great success because of him. So, certainly I see that thematically as the core um, the core of what we're supposed to take away from this chapter. But there are little details that stood out to me that I wanted to have some dialogue about. One of the things that continues to stand out to me is this emphasis on the color blue.
Yeah,
So every time I hit the color blue, I'm like, there it is again.
yeah,
There it is. It's like the only color we ever hear about. Um, like uh the blue sapphire, right? It's mentioned on page 19, the first page of the chapter. His son has blue eyes. The first technology that Jobs and Fernandez put together was called the blue box,
yeah,
that they sold 200 of. And then the mineral that is named after Mike Scott,
yeah,
it's cobalt blue.
yeah,
So those, just in this one chapter, we have all of those mentions of blue. No other, well, there are other colors mentioned. I guess I have to say that when they were talking about the design of the Apple computer and the whole blue, beige thing, and
yeah.
how
Apple beige.
Steve Jobs is so difficult and yeah.
Yeah, no, it's
So anything, oh yeah, and the whole blue box for
yeah,
the Appalachian Trail or box,
yeah.
it is
That
blue. So there's a lot of blue.
yeah, there's blue that pops up everywhere, and that's why I looked into scotiite, which is a barium copper silicate, and it came up with a symbol for it too. But um, you know, this blue is on my list of keywords to look at throughout the chapter, and the number 5 as well.
Mm.
Because there's things
Yeah.
that are repetitive throughout there, and I think it's there for a reason. The word joy. You know,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, when he reveals solves it when it's been found, I think those are going to play a pretty big role. What that is now, I don't know, but that's why we're going through these chapters and seeing if every time he says it, if something points out, or if it's not that mechanical, maybe it's some other way how it points out. But yeah, it's a good point. I'm not sure at this point, where that comes into play. You know,
Right.
so I
Yeah.
think
I'm not sure either. I'm not sure either.
yeah, I think at some point it will. But I agree with you on the I have first critical step to acquiring something we desire, have a roadmap. He talks about it in the first part with the sun, and creating this map and how important it was. Um, he tells us, a literal story about his son doing it. So I think it's important. Does it tie into the map at Appalachian Trail? That's for a whole different episode topic. But it's important, right? Um, and he goes on to reinforce this as well in other stories in the next chapter too. So definitely important thing to note. And he also, um, which ties in with that. Not, I don't have it as strong of a topic here, but it sort of ties in with that. So Mike Scott believed in order for Apple to become a success, they needed to create a solid company culture, right? It's important. Yeah, it's important to have the creativity and things like that, that both Steves brought, but there was no guidance. It's like a shotgun approach or a rifle approach, right? You have all these great ideas
Yeah.
coming in all these directions, but if they're not guided and directed the proper way, this is exactly why I had you come on this channel. You're
Right.
you're the Michael
Right. Because I
Scott.
can help. I am,
You are
and
the
I'm
Michael
I'm not even
Scott of
going to
this.
choose which one you are of the others.
Yeah, I could be
Um,
neither. I'm probably Scottyite or something, but
yeah,
you have all
yeah,
these
um,
whirlwind of ideas going around, and I need structure, right? And that's why you came in there.
yeah,
So that's that
yeah,
I think that's a really
absolutely.
important, but it's an important thing to note because there are, I mean, if you compare it to the book, right, there's a lot of information, a lot of important good information, and you can relate that to both Steve's. There's a lot of good ideas they had, but without Mike Scott that really put them together, he's sort of putting together clues, if you wanted to use that as the same parallel, you know and I thought that
Right.
that's
Yeah,
why
absolutely.
it stuck out to me, why it was important on there, you know
Yeah. You know, I really enjoyed the story about Apple, and that this was, at first, I guess, before I'd read it through the first time, I was like, this is such an odd connection, like a tech company to a treasure book. But obviously, it makes sense when we get to the knowledge that Mike Scott had this interest in gems and what have you. But one of the things that always gives me a little thrill is seeing the mention of Hewlett Packard, because I worked there for quite some time.
yeah,
And the fact that he rejected the idea that Hewlett Packard, who are quite revered at the company still yet to this day, but rejected the initial idea, I think is a hoot. But one of the things that stands out to me, always as I'm reading through, is the mention of any geographies. So we see that mention of Silicon Valley, of the Bay Area, which of course is the birthplace of these technologies, and Apple and HP and all of that. But one thing I didn't know previously, and another mention of geography in this chapter, is it says that soon after returning from a fruit orchard in Oregon, Jobs named their new company Apple. So Oregon, it goes on my list
yeah,
of geographies that are mentioned. Does clearly it is a true fact. I'm presuming it's a true fact. See, that's where I go, like, maybe I need to research this
yeah,
outside of it. Was it an apple
yeah,
orchard in Oregon? Was it another state? Like, is this a clue? Do the mentions of particular geographies have some sort of significance that we need to pay attention to?
yeah. Well, that's why we got that big life-size, quarter scale map of the United States that's laminated, that's going to go up on the wall. So we can mark these areas and see if there's a
Yeah,
correlation on it. And I recommend
right.
people do this as well. We're doing something similar with Appalachian Trail, but that's
Yeah.
for another video. But yeah, I didn't pick up on the Oregon thing actually until my second or third time around. Well, I read it, but it didn't jump out like, hey, that's pretty important. You know, why were they
Sure.
talking about one area and then jump to the other? Why, they could have just said, you know, during a trip to an apple orchard, right? Why did he have to say Oregon? It could have been any apple orchard.
Right. Right.
I'm sure
Yes.
there's many
Yeah.
in California. you know, um,
Exactly my point. That when he writes, he gets into some very specific details
yeah,
that, if they aren't a clue, are kind of irrelevant to the story. To your point, if Oregon isn't some sort of clue, then saying an apple orchard is plenty. You
yeah,
don't have to say where the apple orchard was,
right,
but he does.
yeah. And he didn't get to the detail of where at in Oregon, but he didn't be so vague as just to say an apple orchard, right?
Right.
So there was a specific on it, yeah, it just didn't. I don't know. It didn't really make sense why he would, other than being some type of nod or clue to something. So blue,
Right.
the number five, Oregon are still
Yeah.
popping.
And so now I just have like a bing thought that just popped out to me, and I'm going to throw it out there, worthy of discussion. I'm not sure, but periodically we go back to the question of, does the map in the chapter on the Appalachian Trail have anything to do with any of the other boxes, or is it solely um, significant to that box?
You're opening up a
And
whole
it
can of
just popped
worms
into my
there.
brain.
yeah,
It just popped in my brain. We don't have to
yeah,
dig into it. It just popped
yeah,
into my brain that there is indeed an apple tree on the map.
yeah. Well, there's a bushel of fruit, and it looks like an apple. Some people say
Oh yeah,
oranges. Some
bushel fruit.
people,
That's what it
you
is.
know,
Bushel of fruit that looks like apples. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, you can only. I
yeah,
mean, I guess the first thing that comes to my mind when you see bushel is apples, but that could be a regional thing. Yeah, it's just
yeah,
important. It's something to think about. Um, but
yeah,
there are other items that tie into this theme. I have a high priority on. He goes, think of these pages as your map. They offer a place to start, directions to follow, and ultimately a destination at which to arrive. And then he goes, there's three things. So I'll read them off real quick and we can talk about them. And as you encounter stories or ideas you can divine from, write them down, draw them out, and analyze them. Sometimes it takes a while for an entire plan to come fully into focus. And then without a roadmap, it's easy to aimlessly wander. You know,
yeah,
so there's a lot to unravel in that, right? Focus on the stories. They set the theme. The details in which to draw your metaphorical or literal map from. You know, he couldn't make it any more clear to me. I even have trace paper that I'm tracing out pictures because they always seem to be some weird little border around the pictures. I don't know if that at some point may come up to be something, but um,
right.
there's a lot in there, a lot in those comments, right? Without a map, it's easy
Yeah,
aimlessly to wander. Divine from, you know,
yes.
I don't generally use that type of language I'm talking, but there's a lot you can divine from, perhaps. But what's done is done, right?
I so that whole section you just read was where I was going next. So I love that our brains are like heading to the right
yeah,
thing, because I think that's so significant. Um, yeah, think of these pages as your map,
yeah,
which is important, right? They offer a place to start, directions to follow, and a destination at which to arrive. So that's a set of three, right?
hmm
Um, Place to start, directions to follow, destination to arrive. And then you pointed out the other kind of triplet there. Um, Stories or ideas that you can divine from, like divination is the source of that use of divine. Um, write them,
draw them out.
divine from, write them down, draw them out, and organize them. So yeah, I mean, I love that. Write them down, which we're doing. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's in our spreadsheets. Draw them out. Super interesting. Like you talk about the tracing, but what is the draw them out?
Yeah.
Like I think there's something there that we haven't totally pinned down yet. Organize them. And I think the organize to me made me think about how we are looking for these themes or trends like the blue, the five, other things that are repetitive, all the locations. So it's organizing those themes in a way that perhaps we can find some trends or um, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I was putting an
clues
extra
within that.
check mark by that comment because, at some point we're going to swing back around these and things that really stick out. I want to make sure that we capture um, to go over because,
Yeah.
as we go through these chapters, now that we've gotten into chapter one, things start picking up, right? Even though there was a lot of good information in the intro on how to read this book, I think we're going to start seeing the themes and repetition, and I want to capture all those. So at some point we can do a recap when we get to a point in the book, or towards the end or whenever, that we can revisit these and see how they play together. Because I think we're gonna start seeing a lot of patterns through this, and as we do the drawing and things like that, I'll put them up on the screen, and we could talk about those as well. But this is chapter one, right? This is what sets the stage for everything. So I think it's really important that the things he's saying here, I think we're going to start seeing them reappear in different ways throughout the book.
Absolutely. I'm so excited. Can't wait to dive into chapter two next.
Yeah. So I think we're coming up on time, right?
We are. Yes.
Okay. So with that, I think we covered just about everything we wanted to. You know, put I'll put some notes in here for next time in case there's some pictures we want to go over. But with that, you know, read over chapter one. Let us know what you think in the comments and everything. And next time we'll cover chapter two. And do you have any teasers for us for chapter two yet, or no? Before we go,
I do not. I am
no.
behind on my homework.
Yeah.
I am not there yet.
Okay. Well, we'll have some good stuff for you regardless. So don't forget chapter two. Don't forget to watch my Forest Fen video I did the other day. I thought it was pretty interesting. Maybe you are too. I don't know if you're looking for that box. And if you are looking also in Beyond the Map's Edge, go to Treasure Hunt with Us. They have really good information on there. They have a really good series on the question and answers they did with Justin Posey in Montana. So, with that, have a great week, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
All right.